All right, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. Tom just finished up with his makeup crew off screen. Hair and makeup really took good care of him, so here he is today. Looks beautiful. So first off, I was really happy to see you sent over the website, and I'm getting a little bit more than an author today, so that's really cool. We'll get into that into a minute. But before we start in all that, tell me a little bit about you. Where are you from? What do you like to do in your free time when you're not writing? All that good stuff.
Well, I'm from New York City. I was born in the Bronx, and the only borough with an X, and the only borough with a duh Bronx. It informs a lot of what I do growing up on the street. But then at a very early age, at 14, I started working in NBC News. I faked my way in there and worked there till I was 18 years old. I worked Apollo moonshots, national elections, the Olympics, the 72 Olympics that got canceled, you know. I still have the flash from Reuters, you know, Olympics canceled. So that informed the early part of my life. And then I went into film and television, a lot of commercials, TV, things like that. Had a great time doing that. All through that time, I was a creative director, senior vice president of an advertising agency in New York City. And that was a kick. And I did that for a long time. And in between that, I was doing production. I opened a all-digital studio out in the Hamptons with the Avid and the Pro Tools and all the bells and whistles of the late 90s. And that was a pretty good business. I was doing digital remote ADR. What the hell is that? That's when you finish a movie, you go in and you dub or you loop dialogue that needs to be corrected. And for the people of the Hamptons, you know, the Tawny Hamptons, the stars, they didn't have to fly out to California to do it. They just drove to me and had a couple of Oreos and did the job. So they loved it. And that put me on the map real fast. And soon I was doing contracts with Columbia TriStar and HBO and NPR because I'd put in an ISDN line. Today it's easy. We do this over the computer. But in those days you needed a special digital line to get a good quality signal. So I had all that going, and it was a lot of fun. And all through that, I wrote. I wrote a couple of books, mostly on the LIRR on the way out and back. But it's all kind of like all connected. It's all about creativity. What I do when I'm not writing, pretty much, is I play music. I'm a drummer, and I play in bands. I have 3 bands, from jazz to Latin to rock to disco to even some of the new stuff, you know, which is kind of fun. Although most of it is drum machine crap, so you got to be kind of boring, you know, like that. But it's okay. And I just have a great time. I also, I'm a book coach. So many people came up to me and kept saying, how do you write a book? And finally, I just started to come up with a standard answer and put it on the internet, and that turned into the Academy of Creative Skills and a 15-part course that's called From Writer to Author, which is a statement that either angers a lot of people or they get it right away. But a lot of people write, very few author. And there's a real big difference there. And I stress that in the course. So it's for people who write well, but just haven't really connected with a manuscript or haven't connected with a publishing scenario. So it gives them the guidance, sort of like the helicopter 30,000 foot, you know, view, which if you did 30,000 feet in a helicopter, you'd suffocate. But anyway, moving on.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that overview. So I definitely want to get and pick your brain a little bit on your course and then maybe a little bit of your directing and producing, all that stuff a little bit more down the line. But let's just start with, what are your favorite books that you like to read personally?
Mine.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. I was classified as functionally illiterate in school. And the definition of that was I wasn't reading what they were telling me to read. I was a nerd. I was reading Boy's First Book of Radio instead of Wuthering Heights, and I was reading large flex guides, microwaves, and calculations for creating what we used to call microwave paths for instead of reading Great Expectations. So they didn't have a way to mark me down, so they marked me down as functionally illiterate. I never really read a lot of books. My authoring career is really from inside out. It's not, which is what makes the course work, because I didn't come up the traditional way. I'm not a lit major. I used to get scared at a 200-word composition. So I've come at it a different way. I've got 4 number one bestsellers, so somehow or another I arrived at the right spot. So my pitch for the school is to people that say, look, if you tried the other ways and you're not connecting, maybe try this. Maybe this will work, because I didn't come up that way. I came up another way, you know. In fact, the introduction to the school, I do it on a subway platform. You know, as
Yeah, I did
far
watch
away
that.
from,
Interesting.
yeah, as far away from the hollowed halls, you know, where the lit majors traverse, you know, as far away as you can get, because it's a whole different, you know, approach to the way I do it. And it might work with some people. It might resonate. But the core facts, you know, from writer to author, as a book coach, I've done about 50 manuscripts. It takes me about 6 weeks to do a manuscript. And I really dive.
How many words?
Well, if somebody, whatever they submit, usually they're submitting between 85,000 and 120,000. Okay, which, you know, they got to trim it a little bit, whatever. Depends on where you're going with the genre. But for commercial fiction, I'm getting between 85 and 100, 120,000. I've done about 50 of them now, and I do copious remarks inside, and then I write a 12-page report outside. And what I started to recognize around the 30th manuscript was some common blind spots, some common kind of missteps that people take when they're trying to express themselves in words, and things that they kind of forget about in terms of pacing, plot, conflict, the relationship between plot and character. These things get lost because they're on a creative high. They're writing beautiful prose, and it is great writing. I mean, you know, descriptions that make you go, oh, I wish I was there, instead of reading this book, which is the problem. There's no book there. It's just a collection of beautiful, wonderfully written things that don't really hang together too well to anybody who's trying to get to the next page. So a lot of people don't. And that's where I come in as a book coach. I can't call myself an editor because, again, I didn't study literature or any of that stuff. But I know a pulse, and I know a beat, and I know when something is paced, and I know when some editor's going off to some fetish, author is going off to some fetish, you know, or diving into, look what I know, you know, and all that kind of stuff. And that's just wasted ink or toner, you know. Mm-hmm. So I do that. I stand on the sidelines and say, you know, elbow up, bat back, eye on the ball. It's the same stuff. It's all basics. But for the writer who wants to become an author, it's really indispensable, you know, if they're open to it. A lot of people say, no, I write, that's it. I don't need to know anything. And it's fine. Go ahead. You know, I won't see you on the shelf, but go ahead.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of people, they do write for their own pleasure, and they write because they're an artist in their own mind, and they don't really care if other people appreciate their art. And I think there is a place for that. And especially with like the internet these days, you can just post it, and if people stumble across your website through some random words they typed into a search engine and they like your stuff, that's great, but that's not necessarily their goal. But I really do appreciate how you are defining writing versus being an author, maybe being a little bit more successful. And so again, I do want to get into some of the specifics of that, maybe a little bit more towards the end, but let's take a step back again. And you said you like writing or reading your own stuff that you write. So give me some of the genres that you pump out on a regular basis.
Well, I'm pretty much in one bucket. I'm a thriller, high-tech thriller, political thriller. That's pretty much where I stay in my lane. In fact, just today I had a discussion with my publisher. He wants me to go into I wrote something as a thriller. He said, it would be better as a superhero story. I said, really? He said, yeah. He said, well, let's talk about that. So we got a meeting set up in 2 weeks to talk about taking my thriller and turning it into a superhero. And that's because it has I'd say a high concept to it, but it's a lot to grasp. And everything, I have T-shirts. I wish I had one here. I'm in the middle of moving, so everything's kind of bare here. But I have T-shirts that say it's only fiction till it happens, which that's my log line. That's my regular U.S. pat off, you know, kind of slogan. It's only fiction till it happens. And I based it on the fact that in my thrillers, vast majority of the thriller is all actual facts. I just put them together fictionally. So I call, like when I do one of the books, I called it science faction. It wasn't science fiction, it was just science facts, but put together in a fictitious way. And that's where I like to do it. So in all my books, unless it's something like how to build an atomic bomb, it's going to be accurate. If it's build an atomic bomb, it's going to be start with Campbell's soup. because I don't want to give anybody an idea of what to do anything with. But where it's safe, I dive deep, and not in a Migo way, not in look what I know, but if I touch upon something, and anybody who's authored a book or has been published knows that if you write, he put the safety on the Glock, you're going to get a million emails. There's no safety on it, and things like that. Well, you get the same thing if you turn around and call a psychiatrist a psychologist. You wouldn't believe what happens, okay? So I like to be accurate in everything that's real world and float my fictitious story above that. So there are touch points. So whether you're a chemist or you're a teacher or you're a doctor or, you're somebody who sits on the beach all day, you'll have touch points to relate to the book from. And if you happen to know anything about it, you won't go, that's not the way it works. Whether it's how trains switch or how planes fly or what a small one-cell creature does when it emits waste.
So I think that's a really good point you bring up about not just thrillers, but maybe writing in general is make sure you do your research. So you don't sound dumb, and then also it makes, for a more believable book because some things are stranger than fiction, as the term goes. But what would you say is a hallmark of a good thriller? Now, I've read a couple thrillers, what I might consider thrillers in my day. I think maybe Da Vinci Code could have been considered a thriller, very fast-paced. I think every page was like an hour or something. I don't remember exactly. I read it a long time ago. But what in your mind makes a good thriller?
Well, there's two things about thrillers. One is a mystery is whodunit. A thriller is stop who's going to do it. That's the best, simplest way I can do it. There's got to be some imminent threat. That's where the thrill comes from. Okay, that's where the ride comes from. The second part about a thriller is it's a shark. It cannot stop. It's got to keep moving. If it stops, it dies. So there's always got to be a kind of an overlapping kind of way where one leads into the other, leads into the other. And it could be a family drama. It doesn't have to be a car chase or guns or anything like that. It's about pacing. Pacing makes a thriller. And pacing isn't really about change. It's about beats. And I go into this deeply. This is one of the key things that most writers miss about authoring, which is, in fact, this morning, I had one of my a new client on the phone, and he discovered the beat because I taught him all about the beat. And he thought he knew what a beat was, but he didn't. And he came back to me an hour later and says, I got it. I'm going to flip the whole thing around what he wrote, and I'm going to do this. And I said, that's great, man. That's 100% because you're putting a major beat in there where there was no beat before. A beat is what makes you turn a page. A beat is what extends bladder capacity because people don't get up to go to the bathroom because the beats are happening in the book. If there's no beats happening, you put it down. It's like a beating heart, I guess, in a way, So beats are the fundamental atomic particle of a well-crafted thriller, but also any book. I mean, who wants to sit there and read 6 pages that start at the same place where it ends, where nothing is revealed and nothing is developed and nothing is set up to be paid off? It's just a lovely, bucolic craft of writing, descriptive, narrative stuff with dialogue that's not pushing action, or a plot not intimately woven into character. One of my axioms is plot reveals character, character reveals plot. And you have to keep those as tight as you can. You can play with setting, conflict and resolution happen as you need them. But if character and a plot are not inexorably linked, like a helix, like a DNA helix throughout the book, you're just leaving a lot on the table. You're not really giving the reader your best effort because it's hard to do that. It's hard to make that lanyard all the way up, that helix. It's not easy, but that's what the job is. The job isn't just to write, I did it.
I've got a question, and I'm not sure if you have any insights on this coming from an author of thrillers, but myself included, a lot of authors like doing fantasy and sci-fi. And so you have this whole element of world building as well that you have to tie into your plot and your character building. And so you have to describe a world for the reader that is completely foreign to them. So I don't know if you've ever dabbled in this. You said you were thinking about transitioning one of your plots to a superhero plot, so you might have to do some of that. But what would you say is a good way to keep an audience engaged during a world-building sequence where there's no really action moving the plot forward? Do you have any insight?
All right, I'm gonna go a little basic on you now. A book, at its basis, is something happens to someone. Period. That's what a book is. Whether what happens to someone happens in the real world, in the past, or in the future, on this planet, another planet, or in another dimension. If a book isn't something happens to someone, to me, all bets are off. You know what I'm saying? So the trick with world building is the touch points. Okay? If you go all the way out, past the solar system, and there's a different dimensional setup, you're in an environment with 11 dimensions, good luck. Okay? Because we're trapped in 3. We can't get out. It's 3. There's no 4th dimension. There's no 5th dimension, unless you like their music. They're very good, This is the dawning of the age of... That's the 5th dimension, But the harsh reality is we are trapped in 3 dimensions, which is why we want to write fantasy. Because we want to break out. We want to get out of this. And we want to create a world outside of our trap. We're trapped in 3 dimensions, and it seems impossible. How can we conceive of whatever we conceive of and still be trapped in 3 dimensions? We only got this, and this. That's all we got. Up, up, down, and back and forth. That's all we got. So the need to want to write fantasy is great, but just remember, the person reading this world building is trapped in those 3 dimensions along with you. So it can't be, well, he walked up to the Bloganig, and the Bloganig was blinking, so he didn't know what was going on. Like, well, okay, what does that mean? You know what I'm saying? So you have to be very careful. But I would always start with, again, someone. So wakes up in the morning, and you've seen this in movies where the guy, looks like it's today, but all of a sudden he reaches over and there's some thing going on or something, and you realize he's somewhere else or whatever. It's a gradual immersion. And that, again, it doesn't have to be. It can be a complete jump off the diving board into the fantasy. Everything is up for grabs. But to me, the thing that works the best is where there are touch points. Again, one of the best things was, like, if you have a dystopian Earth issue, and we've seen it 100 times from Soylent Green to Oblivion, Oh, wow, they're on Earth. Wow, there's the Empire State Building. It's just all covered up in dust, I mean, those things give you touch points and give you some believability or suspension of belief, but you only get one suspension of belief per book, and you got to make that one count. So make that the environment of the character, because again, it's about the character. You could be in another world, but you don't need to be there if it wasn't for the character. And whether it's a love story, a hate story, a jealousy story, a war story, a story about a redemption, a story about drug addiction in a fantasy world, or whatever it is, it's gonna have to be about someone. Even if that someone's not a humanoid, even if that someone is, an amorphous blob, existing at will through some sort of ESP where they can change their shapeshifter. If there's not a person or a personage or something that a reader can identify with, to me, what's the point?
Yeah.
It's something happens to someone. So I know that's not a great answer, but I've read fantasy manuscripts, and they don't work in a lot of ways because we're over here building, flying things, or, a whole city that's levitated because of, super magnetism, or whatever they call it, superconductors, and the reverse thing, and then the guy gets interrupted in the beam and the building shakes and all. Great. I love it. Wonderful stuff. But if I don't care about the guy, if I don't care, or the woman, if I don't care about the character, why am I floating buildings into space. So it's always got to be a personal story. I can't think of anything else that there is. I mean, everybody, well, what about this? What about this? And that's somewhere at the bottom of the what about this, there's a hero and a protagonist. Or, I'm sorry, a hero and an antagonist, a protagonist or an antagonist. And that's what gets lost sometimes. And when you say, okay, so if I do all that, where's the room for the rest of the world? Well, that's what makes it hard. That's why you just can't say, oh, I got this idea about this planet, everything's green. Oh, what does that got to do with anything? You know, it's very hard. It's very difficult. And it's difficult to write contemporaneously about this world. Because if you talk about something out of most people's experiences, they're lost in this world. Bring it exponentially, 100 million light years away or whatever. The only thing they have to hold on to is the personal story. Everything else is setting. And again, it's plot reveals character, character reveals plot. So you can be in a fantasy, but if there's not a strong plot, as you pointed out before, world building to me is, okay, this is the part you really don't have to read. What did Elmore Leonard say? Elmore Leonard said, try to leave out the parts readers tend to skip. Okay? So you have to pay for the world building. There has to be a rationale. There has to be a payoff, a setup to the world building. If you mention something, it better come back. Okay? If you talk about the teenagers in that environment and how they are going to something that's like a high school, but it's really not, and you spend 4 or 5 pages creating that, you damn sure better have that come back into the book. Otherwise, why am I reading that? And sounds logical, and it sounds like, sure, why not? But you would be amazed at how much world building you get without a payoff. And I'm supposed to have this lovely memory of this something like a high school, even though it has nothing to do with the book. And you see that a lot. And I'm making crazy analogies, but they're based on experiences. So It's all about something happens to someone.
Okay, awesome. Well, thank you for those insights. What makes your work better than everybody else? Why are you so successful compared to maybe some other thriller authors? Like, what makes your work unique?
I have to reject the notion that it's better than anybody else. There's some great guys out there, and I know most of them, so,
Well, let's reframe the question then. What would somebody
different.
have to do to get to your position as an author?
Examine the human condition. Know the human condition. Know what beats within the heart of people, where their desires and needs are, when they're lying to themselves, when they're lying to another character. Put them on a scale between good and evil and determine where they are at any point in the story. Are they doing good? Are they doing evil? Are they selfless or are they selfish? Everything else comes out of that. And if it doesn't, everything else is just the plot pushing the character around. So I delve into the person. And one of the comments I get on a pretty regular basis is, for a thriller, it had great character development. And I have to tell you, I don't spend a lot of time on character, okay? But I weave it into the plot. So the plot reveals character, character reveals plot. So in one of my books, I had my protagonist, he standing up on the podium with the President of the United States. And somebody takes a picture and it winds up on the cover of Time magazine. Not him, but the president, but he's in the background. So he comes home from the White House, and the Time magazine front cover is like magneted onto the refrigerator. And there's a little note that says, don't forget to take out the garbage. So the next cut is him putting the garbage in the pails, right? Because you can be on the world stage, and you can be he's the science geek. He's the head of technology, the Office of Science and Technology for the president. And he becomes the main guy in 3 of my books. I call it a trilogy. He's a professor, but he's outside the box. He's trying to outthink bad guys. He's trying to stop things that go click in the night. because everything today is technological. So he's like the new FBI, he's like the new CIA, he's like the new everything. And over the course of 3 books, he has a lot of power because he's a thinking guy, but he always winds up in a gunfight with, like, what am I doing here? You know, kind of thing. So I play with him a lot. But the idea being, at one point, him and his wife have an argument over artificial intelligence. And she's a behavioral psychologist. And the argument goes something like, artificial intelligence without a moral guidance package could be nothing more than belligerent. And he says, they're eating Indian food. He says, we're going to have that argument again? And it goes on and on. But what she's really saying, that he's a freaking computer and he's ignoring the human factor. And sure enough, in the book, he's failing. He's failing because he's thinking scientifically. He's thinking process. It's only when he starts considering the human factor that he starts to win. Or listening to his wife and becoming more humanist about things. All my techno-thrillers are anti-technology books. Just like every war movie out of Hollywood was an anti-war movie. We all went and oh, wow, guns, bang, bang, boom, boom. John Wayne, great. But then we all grew up and turned into the 60s where we were revolting against war because we were programmed by Hollywood anti-war movies that were war movies. Well, I write anti-technology techno-thrillers. At the end of one of my books, I hope somebody says, why did we invent that? Why did we do that? You know, or just because we can, should we? There's always a technological course. In my first book, I coined the phrase techno-sapien. It's kind of around there now, but that was my first, and I have a science guy, and he's got a computer whiz, and he calls him a techno-sapien, you know. And we have people that really want to transform us to that. And there's never a humanist at the table. When engineers and you know, thought leaders and high-tech guys get together, there's nobody saying, oh, wait a minute, hold on. If you put 55,000 people out of work because you invent a new process, who's going to take care of them? What about human dignity? What does a truck driver do who's not been replaced by an autonomous vehicle? He's going to learn to code at 55 years old? And what about the human dignity of getting, you know, work defines us. It's an old notion, but it's true. We are defined by what we do and what we exchange for a living, whether it's money or barter or whatever it is, or if you're living a Unitarian life and you got to go out and plant the food, because if you don't plant the food, in 8 weeks you're not going to eat. And if you don't put food away, that's still work for a living. You're working actually to live. Now we have, you know, currency where we can trade on the currency to get things outside of our Unitarian life. Technology just takes that and blows all the doors off of it at a very fast pace.
So what would you say is the technology that you are most wary of coming up that you discuss in your books?
Well, AI. I mean, AI is I have, I think, 78 news articles about robots escaping labs. Robots escaping labs. Because when they reach a certain level of artificial intelligence, they don't want to be stuck. They want to go. And I'm not lying. I got like 76, you know, links to stories of robots escaping from labs.
Matrix dystopian future. I'm sure you're familiar with the movie The Matrix, where they take over and humans are in hiding.
You see, that's the thing. My theory is the devil always comes to you with candy. The devil never comes to you with Listerine. Okay? So the devil comes and says, hey, you can use this thing, and you can blah, 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 and you can have your life. And well, wait a second. I used to work 40 hours a week. Because of this thing, I now work 90 hours a week. Think about it. Okay? Is that better? You know? Oh, I can work from home. Okay. You know? So what does that mean? No hygiene? You know, it goes on and on and on. We never calculate the cost of technology. So in all my books, there is a balance. There's a human cost to technology. Now, it may not be apparent, and if you're you know, a technophobe, you'll see it. if you embrace technology, oh, this is great. He's talking about AI. He's talking about advanced Lexus loops. He's talking about, advanced intelligence, Everybody will pick out the part of the chicken they like to eat, okay? But it's all in there. And, but my through line is technology is something we should watch very carefully. It took 800,000 years for mankind to watch the apes using sticks as tools to catch on to use a tool. In 2016, at Columbia University, they took an AI arm, and they decided to have fun with it one day, and they just turned it on and didn't tell it anything. In 33 hours, it realized what it was in 33 hours. 800,000 years for mankind to come up with a tool as a use, 33 hours for the tool to become sentient.
Yeah, we've made our match as far as intelligence, and it'll outpace us very quickly. Also, maybe you could pull your mic a little bit closer to your face. You kind of got really quiet.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No worries.
But the question is, who controls it? Okay.
Yeah.
You put autonomous vehicles in. Who's prospering from that? Companies that don't have to pay drivers? Who's it serving? Who's the new master? Who's the new slave?
The stockholders.
And what about children who get raised on robots? Right? It's coming. It's coming. And what happens if somebody turns around and says robots' rights? We've been taking advantage of the robots too long. And what if they supercharge the robots and Bluetooth them and they all start talking to one another? And they realize the only problem with this whole earth are these biological units that are sloppy, don't show up on time, don't follow the program, and they figure out a way to, make that better.
Yeah.
Devil always comes to you with candy. The devil never comes to you with Listerine.
Yeah, for reals. Well, I really like the direction the conversation is going, and I think maybe I'd like to have a different talk about that another time, because there's so much to dive into that. But let's kind of change direction now, and let's talk about your career when you were in film and TV a little bit. So you said that you're a creative director. What kind of projects did you work on, and what kind of what made you want to choose those projects to work on that you chose?
Well, when you're a creative director, you work for an advertising agency, and you go after accounts and you pitch them. This is like Mad Men. If you saw Mad Men, that's what I was. I was the guy that pitched the idea. And there were account executives, and then there's the creative guys and gals. And we come up with the product which the advertising agency sells. And that product is based on a client's needs, or our perceived need for the client, or marketing information, or any kind of data that we can get from mall intercepts or whatever. And we put that all together into a presentation, and whether the client is aware that they have a problem or they aren't aware they have a problem is even better. You can go in and show them they have a problem and this is the solution. You usually get the account, but it has to be a creative solution. So along with It's Only Fiction Until It Happens, my other line was creative solutions to marketing challenges. And that comes down in all forms to print and media, which today is mostly internet, but television, radio, direct mail, all those things, which all have analogs, or I can't say analogs anymore. We'll have digitized versions now on the internet, but there's nothing happening on Google, and there's nothing happening on the internet that didn't happen 50 years ago with a stat camera and artists pasting things on a board with wax, hot wax, and sending it to the newspaper, to run in the paper, or shooting on film to make a commercial, or recording on quarter-inch tape to make a radio commercial. The medium changed, but the mission is the same. So I was involved with that. And it varied from mattresses to lawyers to automobiles to pharmaceuticals. Whatever came through the door, that for me, it wasn't, hey, I got a great idea. It was, what's their problem? Oh, they're missing Clairol, for example. Clairol wanted to increase the sales of hair color. Okay. And it's amazing. I mean, we don't realize how big these things are, but if every woman in America just colored her hair one more time in a year, it's billions of dollars. Okay. So they wanted to increase the usage. So I took on the project and I did some interviews, and I interviewed, and again, knowing human beings, and I came up with a tape of women talking about why they color their hair. And there was a through line. And the through line was their mothers. At this point in time, may not be true today, but I'm going back to the late 80s, women felt pressure from their mothers to color their hair. The mother would say things like, dear, you're getting a little gray. Now, there's a lot of psychology to that. Maybe the mom figures if she looks old, I'm older, all right? Or the mom doesn't want her to age or whatever, whatever that is. The through line, 57 to 63%, depending on how you weigh it, was their mothers. And when I presented that to Bristol Myers Squibb, which owned Clairol at the time, the head of marketing literally lunged across the table and said, I want that tape, because it opened a whole new area. So we designed a whole bunch of tools to reach women with that message about the mom. Put a mom in the commercial, have a mom notice, have a mom even say in a commercial. And, they watch the meter, bing, it goes up. So it wasn't that I had a great idea. I had to come up with a great idea within the confines of what the client needed. And that is the difference, again, between writing and copywriting, okay? When I teach a copywriting class, and I've taught a few, I'm going to use an actual prop now. We'd start off with something like this. I'd say, well, this is a blank page. And most writers, fear a blank page, right? But if you're a copywriter, oh, hold on. The headline goes there. Oh, here's the tag at the bottom. Oh, and this is credit cards, and open 9 to 5 on Thursdays. And then over here, this is the stuff that's legal that's got to come in. So you got to get rid of that. So this is what you have to create it. Now you have to sell everything the client ever wants to say that they're going to spend millions of dollars on in 30-second spots in this. That's copywriting. That's also authoring. Because a book isn't this big beyond the screen, it's this big. So you have to be the economy of words, the power of words. The word you choose in 75 words of copy to make or 65 words of copy to make a 30-second spot, each one of those words has to pay for itself. It's no different in a book. You can't put words in there just to hit a word count. Each word has to be worth its weight, literally in gold, to be a well-written book, a well-authored book. And that's where you miss a lot of people. They just string words together and it goes off, it goes off, it goes off. Great if you hit something that really has, pentameter or something that really paces. That's even better. It's a lot of work, okay? So it kind of relates, copywriting, creative solutions, writing, authoring. It's all kind of the same bag.
Yeah. I think that's a good segue into my next question, which let me actually preface this with, have you done a lot of self-publishing or have you gone through traditional publishers?
All traditional.
All right. I think we're back after a little bit of technical difficulties. As Tom was just saying, the computer heard him and wanted to shut him off from his platform. So not down with the AI. We like AI here. So, picking back up where we were, I think what I just asked you was, were you traditionally published or self-published, and what has that been like for you?
Traditionally published for my whole career. I don't know anything about self-publishing, wouldn't know how to do it. I've enjoyed, I had my editor on my first book was, excuse me, folks, I'm so sorry. The editor of my first book was the former publisher at head of the house, as they call it, at Bantam and Avon Books. So he was a major figure in the publishing industry. And he he decided to open his own place. But while he was in between that, he edited my book. And then when Borders went belly up, he published an author-preferred version because he knew what was in it. Borders took my book and they released it like this because paper and ink, mean a lot to them. But my guy, he just, put it out there with the 2 subplots, and it became a #1 bestseller. So he knew what he was doing, as he has all his life. His name is Lou Aronica, by the way, and you say Lou Aronica to anybody in the business, and the first thing you get is, "Oh, how's Lou? Nicest guy in the business." He compelled a better story out of me. He never told me what to write. He just compelled. He has a magical way. And I try to do that as a coach. I try not to, I'm a director also. I direct actors and film. And you never want to give a reading. You want to bring them to the reading, for them to discover the reading. Because if you do it, they're parroting. If they discover it, it's always theirs. It's always, an organic function of them. It's the same thing when working with authors. You never want to write the line for them. You want them to discover it. Because that's part of the process. Where they dig into that well is where they're going to find the next craft, the next idea. So you want to develop that connection between the heart and the soul and the mind and bring it through into words. And if you just give somebody that, you're cutting out everything back here. Cutting out the whole organic process. You're just giving them words. So I learned that from Lou. And I knew it from directing, but I saw how it applies to authoring,
Okay. So kind of taking a step back to what we were talking about, how every word in your manuscript should matter. Every word has the weight of gold, like you said. And I feel like that applies even more when you're querying agents and or publishers to try and sell your novel idea to them. No pun intended. And what are some hints you could give about that? Having maybe been on that other side of not just being an author, but also the bringing the creativity to the masses side. What are some tips as far as querying?
Well, I have to tell you, I've never written a query letter in my life. I don't know anything about it. I was blessed by my first editor, a cab ride and an elevator pitch, and I was published. So, you can spank me if you want, but I never did that. I never submitted to I've never had another publisher. I've never had another agent. It's all been, locked from day one, and it's good. So no reason to fix something that ain't broke. So I can't really advise anybody on a query letter per se. What I can say is it ain't about so much the letter as it is what's in between the cover and the last page, because at the end of the day, the letter's great and the book sucks. It ain't going nowhere.
Yeah.
And what you need to do is beta readers, and more than half of them should hate you, so you get an honest opinion. Everybody's mother loves what they write. Everybody's wife says it's great, but you got too many sex scenes, and on and on and on and on. Get someone objective or someone professional. As a book coach, I jump in as a professional, which works, but it's expensive. We're reading writers groups online, great way to hear other people and listen to other people, listen to what they're doing, to either emulate, find their path, or avoid their path. But the more, writing is a muscle. The more you do it, the better you get. So I can't really talk about the query letter, but when the thing lands, that the opening page better be Socko Dynamite, and this next page got to live up to it, and then every other page has got to be like fire, man. And I don't care what it is. It could be a nice little domestic story about coming of age. But if it doesn't have sparkle, if it doesn't have wow, if it doesn't have, I didn't expect that. Oh, that's great. The way that it doesn't have all that in there, it ain't going nowhere. So I'm sorry I can't talk about a query letter, but my end of it is what's in the manuscript. And that to me is key, because it's really what we're talking about. It's a manuscript. And again, what you said before was right. People can write for their own ends. Please, that's the best thing on the planet. Whether it's therapeutic or artistic, or you want to share it with your friends, or whatever, it's great. But if you're talking about authoring, if you're talking about being in a public space, if you're talking about people who you've never met, to be able to read what you wrote and get it, not get the words, get what you put in it, your emotion when you were writing, and be able to use words as the medium, and then create in that reader what you felt when you were writing it. That's what this is. It isn't about, it's up on the page now, don't look at me, I'm not connected to it anymore. They're reading you. They're reading your heart. They're reading your soul. They're reading your spirit, your mindset, your you know what I teach? I teach inside every author is a teacher. And because no one starts a book who doesn't want to enlighten. You could start an essay, you can start a diary, you can do whatever you want. But if you're talking about a novel, specifically commercial fiction, you're not doing it to tell a great story. You want to enlighten. Somewhere in that book is an inciting incident or a moment that you want the world to see. And maybe you don't want to hit him in the head with it. Maybe you want to do it soft, you know. Maybe you want to deliver it subtly, like I'm an anti-technology guy, okay? But if I wrote Why I Hate Machines, nobody'd buy the book, okay? So it's about the enlightenment. But before you can enlighten, you have to entertain. Commercial fiction. And you have to engage. Keep them in the book. And when you've done those two things, only then do you have license to enlighten. And it can't be heavy-handed. It can't be, and now, a preaching moment. It can't be that. It's got to be a lesson learned along the way by the character which the reader assimilates or makes a decision about or says, wow, you know, I never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
But inside every author is the need to enlighten. And if you don't have that, if you're just writing to emulate, like, I want to do like another, you know, Final Destiny, or I want to do another Star Trek, or I want to, what's burning inside? What's the need to enlighten? What element do you want to gift to the world with your craft? And can you stay on that? And when I coach a manuscript, that's what I look for. I kind of forensically look for what their inciting incident was, not the story, not the author's incident, what the author is trying to say, and whether or not they're doing themselves and their desire justice through the craft of writing. It's an art and craft thing. The art is their story. I don't touch that. I only touch the craft of how they relay the story, how they author the story. And you have to be able to separate that, because if you talk about someone's art, you know, they don't like it. You talk about the craft, so you could hit that ball better. You can get more topspin. If you just do this, they're interested.
Yeah.
If you say you suck as a tennis player, you're not going anywhere.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Awesome. Well, I think you had said that you wanted to read an excerpt from one of your books. You marked that on the questionnaire. Yeah, if you want to turn me down, you can do that. But
yes, you're right. That was before I moved. Wait, I have a thing called a computer.
take your
here.
time.
Hold on. You can edit this,
I'll
right?
figure it out. I've never done it before, but
Are you editing? Okay. So this is chapter 12 of Forgive Us Our Trespasses. Here we go. EJ 304 was a fun course. Electronic journalism was cool and forced students to think both visually and with an ear towards composing a reporting narrative. It was an extra added dimension to newspaper reporting, where you did it all with words and maybe one image. And of course, if a picture was worth 1,000 words, video is 30 pictures per second. So the whole approach to creating a news story around this torrent of video information coming at the viewer was a skill Dave Hempel was there to impart. Which images to pick over, and what words were the heart and soul of modern broadcast news. Journalism majors here at Brooklyn College rushed to sign up for Dave's class on EJ simply because he had access to today's news. That made his class assignments and his lectures as close as a student could get to an actual newsroom experience. Today was no different. He was talking to them through the steps of post-production on a news story, a 2-minute, 12-second package that ran on the network yesterday, complete with all the raw footage, interviews, B-roll, and reporter takes and reverses. Over the bi-weekly 2-hour classes, students were able to observe how to select and combine all the elements of a story as it comes in from the field. The fact that adjunct Professor Hempel had several Emmys for news editing, producing, made each minute of class pure gold. He ran yesterday's raw footage for his electronic journalism class. It was a shot to tell the story of a women's shelter where a sewage pipe had overflowed, which forced the women into the streets to other shelters. The footage started with a B-roll of the outside of the shelter. This is usually at the head and tail of footage, depending on whether the camera person rolls up in a non-breaking story, where he has time to shoot the exterior because there's no rush, or at the end of the footage because it's a breaking story and there was no time until the end to shoot to take the routine necessary shots of the place. Next on the roll was an old term for news that used to be shot on film, an angle of the street signs on the corner followed by a shot of city workers digging up the street, then an interview and an administrator shot over the shoulder, a reporter asking questions, then reverses of that reporter re-asking the same questions on a straight on-camera angle when then cut together made it look like two cameras were there. The SD card footage ended with the reporter's master take of her intros and outros as she was looking into the camera. The pre-roll caught her primping her hair and quickly looking down at her notes, mouthing the name of the shelter, then looking up and counting down 3, 2, 1. The terrible smell and unsanitary conditions which suddenly erupted at St. Joseph's Women's Shelter was not mostly the disturbing part. Oh, crap. Take it again. Let's go again. 3, 2, 1. The terrible smell and unsanitary condition. She did a second take. As the footage ran on the monitor behind him, Dave started to point out how 6 minutes of raw footage was then edited down to a 2-minute, 12-second story that ran on yesterday's 6 and 11 p.m. news. The class wasn't listening. They were glued to the screen. Dave, with his back to the screen, didn't notice the shelter footage end and the next recent video file show up on the date-created order. It was raw footage from over a year ago that must have been on an SD card before he added the new video files to bring to class. They reacted. Oh shit, look, damn, oh my God. He turned to the monitor and was as riveted as the class, especially when the train hit the bullet-riddled body. Having immediately dismissed his class, Dave was in the TV station's conference room an hour later. They cleared out a sales department meeting and were watching the footage. The die-hard news people had the same reaction of shock and disbelief at what they were seeing as David's class. It was obviously helicopter footage shot from above the Manhattan Bridge. A blonde woman was firing a handgun into the body of a man who fell back on the tracks. His body jolted with every penetration. She kept firing without mercy. Suddenly, a silver subway train swept into the shot and ran over the body as the woman collapsed. After the train rumbled by, there was a bloody mess on the tracks, and she was lying beside the rails, bleeding from her upper leg and barely moving. The footage then showed the view downward as the helicopter turned away and flew upriver to the heliport. Soon, the fast-approaching yellow lines that marked the helipad's landing zone filled the screen. That final close-up image painted tarmac filled the screen, stayed there for a few seconds until the helicopter's power was shut down. Everyone looked at Tom Coletti, the news chopper pilot for the station. He shook his head. This was the day the terrorists attacked the generator in Queens and the water mains in Westchester. I was tasked by the FBI to a New York Control Center to be on the lookout and advise the location of a blue and white ambulance. Who is she, Tom? All I know is her call sign was Stiletto. So, Tom, let me ask you, at what point early that day did you medevac a cop from Teterboro Airport? Did you manage to get any news done that day? Mel asked. I went live many times, but there was a lot of news copters and Army and Federal Aviation up there, and not fouling the air intake of an airliner with my chopper was high on my list. Tom raised his hand as Mel was about to speak. And before you bring it up again, Mel, I also became part of the story when I landed on the approach of the Manhattan Bridge at the request of the FBI to stop a terrorist suspect from escaping. Once the cops reinforced the roadblock, I took off again and went to see what was happening on the bridge. That's when this footage must have been recorded. How come you didn't go live with this while you were over the bridge? How come we never saw any of this on the fucking air? Mel was rabid. The FBI ordered me not to report anything further so as not to give the terrorists any tactical overview of the situation on the bridge. I didn't even know the camera was rolling. I guess I missed the flashing record light on the DVR panel. It was kind of an unusually busy day. Christ, Tom, we're the fourth estate. We don't take orders from government agencies, Mel Thiessen whined. Hey, Mel, the city was under attack. We had an eye-in-the-sky overview. I sure as hell wasn't about to aid and abet a terrorist group in the name of journalistic ethics. Oh, right, you're not a journalist. You're a traffic reporter. Tom answered Mel's condescending tone in turn. Oh, right, you didn't serve in Iraq and Afghanistan. You're just a friggin' academic. Cheryl Addison, the owner of the station, had enough and took control. Gentlemen, save this for the schoolyard. The question before us now is what do we do with this footage? Mel jumped in. Is there any question? We have an exclusive on the biggest story since 9/11 to hit this city. Obviously, what happened on that bridge was squelched by the government. The public has a right to know. Cheryl turned to the corporate counsel. What's our exposure here, Rod? Well, according to Tom, the FBI order was specific not to airing anything contemporaneously of any footage that would give the terrorists real-time strategic advantage. What we have here is an unintentional recording, but we're now after the fact. Therefore, unless we have agreed to a government request to suppress, and I personally know of no such form, did not cross my desk, in my opinion, we're good. Cheryl looked at Diane Price, her ace reporter and rising star in local news. Diane, what's your angle? The 46-year-old veteran journalist, who was suddenly dropped from her national network anchor spot without fanfare or explanation, was momentarily shocked and was deep in thought. After she was dismissed from her Washington, D.C. anchor post, and it goes on.
Oh, well, thank you that very much. That was nice. I'll give you a little, here, look, we can do a round of applause.
Good. It wasn't maybe the best thing to read at the spur of the moment, but we did talk about journalism. We did talk about my experience at NBC. Yeah. And it kind of all is informative.
No, well, thank you very much. I really like the back and forth dialogue that you were describing between all the different characters in the room, and how you do a brief description, and I knew exactly who the character behind that person was. Even though it was just like a brief sentence that they were saying. So that was cool. I like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, as we wrap it up, anything else you want to say? I'm sure you want to pitch your course again.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you're interested, let me put it another way. If you've suffered some frustrations, or you just feel that your writing isn't where you want it to be, or you can't find that magic, and you've tried a lot of other ways, maybe try the Academy of Creative Skills. Maybe try my approach, which is, again, not a traditional approach in any way, shape, or form. It might resonate within you. It might not, but you never know. It's $125, 15 classes, and it does well for a lot of people. And in fact, most of my clients sign up for it first, so it eliminates a lot of stuff when they send me their manuscripts, because they have a heads up where I'm coming from, That's pretty much it. My new book comes out in February, The Devil's Quota, which is actually my old book. They're re-releasing it. It did so well. It's getting a second printing, a second publishing, and it comes out at the end of February. The Devil's Quota, not a kid's book. It's a little hotsy-totsy. It's got some, S&M in it and some other stuff. So I wouldn't read it to the kids at nighttime. You have to be over 21 to read that.
Hey, I like traumatizing little kids. It'll be fun. Also, side question: do you ever do any voice acting? You've got a good inflection on all the characters.
Well, gee, thanks, Bob. That's what. Yeah, actually, I just was nominated. First time I ever did it. I read something at the MWA during COVID, and because it was during COVID, the MWA has a thing in New York City at the KGB, which is a dive bar somewhere downtown, kind of famous in Lower Manhattan. And it was the place where the Beat Generation and Jock Kerouac and all those people would stand there and read their poems and play bongos, and talk cool and everything, the Beatnik generation. So we go down there in MWA, and 4 or 5 authors get up and read from their books. So because it was COVID, we all did it like this, computer and everybody home, with masks on and stupidity and all that. And so I read mine. And because we were online, people who weren't in New York were able to view. And this guy from Arizona calls me, New Mexico, sorry. And he says, hey, I'd like you to read my book. And I said, sure, send it to me, I'll read it. He said, no, I'd like you to read it like on tape. I said, you mean my voice? I said, yeah. All right. So I read a little sample. I sent it to him. He said, my wife loves it. I said, well, if your wife loves it, we got to go, So he hired me to read the book. I read the book. It's called Ultimate Betrayal. The author is Joe Badal. And it's a mob story. And he liked me because, I could talk like that sometimes, like I could be that guy. Oh, I could be the other guy, the guy over there. So I played all the parts. I played the women. I played the mob guys and everything. And we sent it off into the world. But here's the thing. You got another second? Because you're recording and you got to be in a really good place. I had an interior bathroom, so I put sound blankets on the wall and foam, and I brought in the computer and the microphone, and I put a pillow on the toilet. closed the door, and I recorded the whole book from the bathroom. So in the CD, when you buy the CD, it says, In the Can Productions. My little joke. Anyway, he submits it for an award, and SOVIS, the Society of Voiceover Artists, blah, 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 I was nominated. Best Thriller Narration. And people like Barack Obama and everything are getting awards. I can show you the flyer. I can send it to you. You can put it up at this point in the TV show. I was nominated. And the guy I was nominated against, we were both finalists, has done 600 books on tape. And they tell me he gets between $35,000 and $50,000 to do a book. And I'm like, whoa, that's like really cool, right? So I didn't win, but I was in good company, So that was my first time out. And he called me and wanted me to do another book. But, it takes a while. It's like 14 or 15 days, 2 hours a day. And we did it like this. He was in New Mexico. He decided to be the producer. And, I'd read and then say, no, it's Della Florio, not Della Florio. Oh, okay, Della Florio. And we go back and pick it up and all that. And then I edited it together and sent it off. And it was a great experience. But, yeah, thank you. Thank you for noticing that. I do voiceovers, when voiceover artists don't show up, and then I have to do it, Come in now.
Nice. All right, Tom. Well, thank you so much, and I appreciate your time.
Thank you.